yesterday we learned the sad news that the former Dublin senior footballer and Derry manager Brian Mullins passed away at the age of 68. St Vincent's clubman Brian was a legend of the sport, a towering midfielder in Heffo's army, a winner of 4 All-Ireland titles in 1974, 76, 77 and 83. He also won a Club All-Ireland, 2 All-Stars, managed Derry to the Ulster title in 1998 and for many subsequent years was the Director of Sport in UCD. To pay tribute to Brian, we're joined on the line now by Brian's former Dublin teammate Barney Rock. Barney, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John.
Sad news, Barney. Brian was and is an icon of Gaelic games.
Oh, definitely. It was very, very sad to hear. It really only came in May. We were at the Leinster semi-final with Meath and Dublin, and we were all together. There was people from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and present teams were all together at a function. And Brian was there, just come back from Portugal with the Dublin 70s team, and was in great form. And then 2 days later, we heard that he was unwell in hospital. So it's a real shock, and it came very, very sudden for everybody.
What are your abiding memories of Brian, Barney?
I think Brian was the hero to us when he was growing up. Back in '74, I was lucky enough to be in the dressing room when they played Cork in an All-Ireland semi-final, a game which he got a penalty and scored it. And he was the big figure, the big fella at midfield who was only a young lad, 19 years of age, 20 years of age at that stage. And he was the one that really took all the hits around midfield, was the one that when they needed a score and when they needed somebody to lift the game, he was the main man, the go-to man. So it's just unbelievable, the skill level he had, and people didn't realise that he had a lot of skill, but he had an awful lot of skill. It wasn't just about catching. He was a brilliant team player. Was he a real presence when you joined the Dublin setup then in the late 70s, Barney? Oh yeah, listen, we really looked up to him. We were unfortunate that I came on the scene with the Dublin team back in the league of 1980, and just before we got into the championships in 80, Brian had an accident which knocked him out, and unfortunately we didn't really get to play with him 81. It knocked him out for 2 years. He came back in 82 and played another 3 All-Irelands following the 6 he had previously played in the 70s. We're also joined on the line, Barney, by Tommy Drumm, former All-Ireland winning captain. Tommy, how are you?
I'm well, John, thanks.
Sad weekend with the news of the passing of Brian Mullins, Tommy.
Yes, John, it's still very raw, less than 24 hours, so my thoughts will be with Liz and Helen, and condolences to Brian and his extended family. Brian had 10 grandchildren, and I have to say the way that the family looked after him in the Raheny Hospice over the last couple of weeks was exceptional. It doesn't seem so long ago, John, since Brian himself saying goodbye to Hefo, and here we are 9 years later and we're saying goodbye to Brian. But the care and the love that the family and Brian received from Raheny Hospital was exceptional, so a shout out to them.
No, well said, Tommy. And you soldiered with Brian for a long time with the Dubs during the whole 70s period and then in 83 as well.
Yeah, the first game I played for Dublin was with Brian under 21. We played against Meath, and he's been a part of my life ever since then. So a great footballing playing mate and a great friend. Sadly missed.
He was, it seems like from all accounts, Tommy, that he had everything, because midfield was such an important position back then, still is important, but he was able to feel the ball, kick the ball and have that physical presence in the team.
Yeah, there's a couple of standouts for me in the last 24 hours, John. Seamus McHugh reached out this morning, right, and the Galway team of 83 and the Dublin team of 83, we've become quite close. Next year we're celebrating 40 years since we played in the 83 final, but we had a dry run about a month ago, and it wasn't long after Brian became ill. So Seamus McHugh, the Galway captain, addressed the group, the Dublin and Galway group, and he said that if he was given the opportunity to pick a team and given the pick of all players that he's ever seen or played the game, the first person he would pick would be Brian Mullins. So I got the opportunity to say that to Brian a few days later. So he doesn't like praise and never liked praise, but I suppose coming from your opposition, that's the best compliment you could hope to get. Absolutely. And Tommy as well, in the mid-70s, Dublin were in the wilderness, and 1974 was such a huge year for Dublin, and Brian is only 19 years of age and he's in the team and he's making such an impact against Galway, and that set the tone then for those great battles with Kerry. Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind immediately is two people in particular, Dave Hickey and Mick Hickey. You probably know John. Dave Hickey has had cancer a number of times. He's a retired pancreas and kidney transplant surgeon. And anytime any of our team become ill, Dave is the first person to turn up. So his care for Anton O'Toole and now Brian has been exceptional over the last couple of years. So Donnacha O'Brien was the surgeon who operated on Anton and Dave, and we couldn't ask for better care. So the reason I mentioned Dave is that his brother Mick would have played under 19 rugby with Brian in 1974 for Leinster. And I don't know whether you remember, but we had some great rugby players on that team. We're very lucky that Brian chose to play for Dublin in the Gaelic, and he started for Dublin the day after he played and represented Leinster rugby. And so, you know, Brian, he had an incredible level of fitness at a time when the GAA had upped the time for a period of a game for 80 minutes. And Kevin Heffernan tried to make Dublin the fittest team in the country at that stage. And I think it took a number of teams off guard. So Brian's level of fitness right up to the time he became ill, he cycled everywhere, John, out to UCD, every back. He swam a lot. And so it was just a fundamental part of his game. Our full back line and our full forward line will be used to seeing Brian either end of the field, and his distribution, his catching skills were exceptional.
Barney, what was he like in the dressing room?
And in the dressing room, he was the big figure, the person that we were always wanting to listen to him. He became captain after Tommy back in '85, so that was his first year as being captain. But certainly in the dressing room, we would always at that stage looked up to the likes of Tommy, Anton O'Toole, Brian. But in the dressing room, you knew if things weren't going for you, on the field, he'd let you know. So he's one of those fellas that you didn't want him to speak against you, but he'd always be watching out for you.
Also, it was important in any Gaelic community and county that the club is really important, Barney. And Brian was Vincent's to the core, wasn't he? He
was, and he had won his I think All Ireland final in '76 with the club. But in the latter years, I remember meeting him on the sideline. I was involved with Ballymun, and Brian was involved with Vincent. But certainly Vincent was number one outside of Dublin. When he was with Dublin, he gave everything he had. And when he was with Vincent, he gave more than that, because he was a true Vincent man.
There's an iconic photo, Barney, isn't it, of that day you went down to Porky Quay. Ray McManus put it on Twitter today of Brian and Kieran Duff arm in arm, hot day, rare thing to have an All-Ireland replay outside of Dublin. It was a magical day, and Brian was brilliant that day.
Yes, brilliant. The end of August of '83, and like you say, it was the first time Dublin were ever played outside of Croke Park with that team. And on that particular day, he gave an awesome display. And he set the tone. In the first couple of minutes, he ended up scoring a great goal from a penalty. And then all of a sudden he lorded midfield, and he provided us the forwards with plenty of ball and ammunition to put Cork away on that particular day.
Tommy, he was a man of education. He would teach up in Donegal, and that brought him to Derry, and he had great success there as a manager. Tommy.
Yeah, Brian had great emotional intelligence, John, right, and the number of children and that he would have come in contact with through his teaching days in Dublin, up in Donegal, where his family, some of his family still reside, and then in UCD as Director of Sport, and I think Director of Health later on. It's interesting, John, in the last, not long before Brian became ill, we had a meeting, and he said he was aware of one of our mates who was suffering from anxiety. So what Brian wanted to do is to do something that we would build something into our weekly diary to make sure we would support them. And we started off in 9 holes of golf every Tuesday morning, which we did up to the time he became ill. So he was different, and a lot of people maybe would have broken through that outer layer, but he was an exceptional person who influenced for the better an awful lot of people in his career.
It's important to state that as well, because obviously, and rightly so, there'll be a lot of focus on his Dublin career and his legendary exploits in blue. But as an educator, as somebody who gave back for so many years, Tommy, to education, physical excellence, and really such an important thing for society nowadays through ECD.
No, you're right, John. And it's interesting, Ogie Moran made contact this morning just to remind me that Anne, his wife, had been with Brian for 4 years in Thomond, right? So when you look at the teams that Brian has represented, right, he'd be the beating heart of every team he played for, like Thomond, Leinster Rugby, as I said earlier, Dublin as a past captain, St. Vincent's, Leinster, UCD, the All-Stars. He just was an exceptional person to be around, and his time in UCD he regarded with great affection, and he didn't want to retire. He was just enjoying it so much.
Barney, I think over the years, in the last decade, Dublin have been the standard bearers for Gaelic games and Gaelic football in winning things. None of that would have happened with the young people in the county being inspired by the likes of Brian. So from a legacy point of view, Barney, he leaves a substantial imprint on our landscape of our national game.
Most definitely, because without the success of the 70s team and without Brian Mullins being one of them big figures then, the likes of ourselves in the 80s wouldn't have had anyone to look up to, and the colour that our team actually brought was unbelievable. And the amazing, just thinking back on a few things, John, just thinking that Brian actually played in 9 All-Ireland finals. And if you think of back then, you consider now that the present team that have won the 8 in a row, they've only ever played in 8 All-Ireland finals. So Brian still has that fantastic record of having played in most All-Ireland finals. And another thing then was that the Railway Cup, he was figured none of the 70s team had actually won the Railway Cup medal. But back in 1985, Jack Bootman, Sean Boylan and Brian were involved. And Brian, I think, captained the team that day to win the Railway Cup in Croke Park. So he still has a lot of awards that other people, like the present team, that haven't got at that stage.
Tommy, look, we're sorry for you and for Barney. It's very tough to lose a teammate, and it's great that you spent so much time with him. And as I said to Barney, he's going to leave a huge legacy as an icon of Dublin Gaelic football.
Well, John, I have to say, I really appreciate the fact you've reached out and you've managed to allow us to get the word out to so many of Brian's workmates, family and teammates. And I suppose if there was to be a last word from me on Brian's behalf, it would be his passing message to me not long before he died, is to look out for and contact and spend time with those that are closest to you.
Tommy, well said. Tommy and Barney, thanks so much.
You're welcome,
No
John.
problem. Thanks,
Bye.
John.
Tommy Drumm and Barney Rock there on Brian Mullins. May you rest in peace. We're back after this.